In December 2019, I took the train from Barcelona to Madrid to attend the COP25 UN Climate Change Conference. Now, according to the Director General and CEO of the International Air Transport Association, I should have flown. Now, the attitude of the air industry helps demonstrate the impossibility of a net zero emissions future. As we build up to COP26 in Glasgow, it's worth considering that climate conferences seldom run smoothly, and expectations for COP25 in Madrid in 2019 were lower than most. In fact, the conference almost didn't take place. COP25 was saved by the city of Madrid after the Chilean government had refused to host the conference owing to security issues. Now, logistically, this meant a huge effort just for the event to take place. But somehow, Madrid and the Spanish government pulled it off. Over 20,000 delegates and observers arrived in Madrid for the summit at the start of December. As delegates arrived through the thick early morning fog in Madrid, nothing much at all seemed to be clearing. Only a month before, the UN announced that greenhouse gas emissions will likely have increased by 0.6% that year. Prior to the release of this research, the world was contemplating the difficulty of pushing a massive boulder up a steep mountain. We now have to first stop it hurtling towards us. Now, researchers suggested that global emissions must fall by close to 8% per year over the next decade to have any chance of limiting warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. To say that this increase in emissions was disappointing is to put it mildly, but really, what did anyone expect? As the world continues to believe in the impossibility of sustainable growth, which is baked into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the temperature increase of only 1.5 degrees is, many believe, me included, already beyond us. Emissions have to fall, not stay the same, and definitely not increase. But we are only heading in one direction, and it's in the wrong direction. And some industries are heading there faster than most. Now, every industry has a carbon footprint, but the airline industry is one of the biggest. Globally, aviation produced 2.4% of total CO2 emissions in 2018. While this may seem like a relatively small amount, consider that if global commercial aviation were a country, the industry would rank number 6 in the world between Japan and Germany. Now, it is clear and undeniable that to maintain a chance of limiting global warming to well under 2 degrees, we need fewer people to fly, and we need them to fly less often. But not according to the airline industry. In 2019, the airline industry was represented by Alexandre de Joniac, Director General and CEO of the IATA. In a short speech full of spin and hyperbole, he suggested that the industry is happy that it will reduce its overall pollution level by 2030. It will somehow do this while transporting more than 4 times the number of passengers it did just a decade before. Now, he announced this reduction in overall pollution levels without quite explaining how he would do this. By contrast, modelling suggests that the airline industry by 2050 could contribute 20% of global emissions. Alexandre de Joniac mentioned this futuristic electric plane and increased use of yet-to-be-developed sustainable biofuel, and this would make all of the difference. He continued, clearly blinkered and punch-drunk on growth, encouraging attendees to fly to attend national events rather than take the train. After such a blatantly ridiculous thing to say at a sustainability conference of all places, it was hard to take anything he said seriously. But I had to press him on this idea. Should I really have flown from Barcelona to Madrid? Yes, why not? He responded. I pushed him further. Maybe I should have just stayed at home and watched the event virtually. He suggested that the carbon footprint of an event attendee joining virtually should be considered in the round when looking at the emissions of flying to attend an event. Alexandre de Joniac blinkered and punch-drunk. Now, Tate Cantrell, CEO of Verne Global, a leading data provider, said that an extra virtual attendee has an almost negligible carbon footprint. Compare this in the round to the 115 kilograms of CO2 emissions I would have used had I chosen to fly from my home city of Barcelona to Madrid. The attitude of the air industry helps demonstrate the impossibility of a zero emissions future. But of course, they are not alone. Many of the biggest polluters, including the livestock industry, want to see their industries grow, and many of the biggest multinationals, who emit around 20% of global emissions from the biggest per capita polluting country, the US, are opposing the reconciliation bill. Now, this has been called the most significant climate action in the US history by the Democratic leader in the US Senate. Now, one thing is clear as we head into COP26 in Glasgow. Government and regulators cannot rely on corporations and large carbon-based industries to choose to reduce their damaging environmental impacts. Business as usual just means the usual business. Now, businesses, you see, need incentives to move away from destroying the planet. If our major polluter industries are to become more sustainable, you will hear their representatives talk about the need to stabilise their industry. Transition is not out of the question, they say, but it needs to be supported through tax breaks or by taxing the competition. Doing all of this while, of course, allowing them to generate at least the same profits is really what they're after. The idea of an uninhabitable planet is not incentive enough for many of the biggest polluters on the planet to change the way that they do business. As we head into COP26, one thing is clear. We cannot rely on businesses and industries to do what is best for the climate. We have to make sure that regulators and politicians listen to the people most affected by climate change. Only then will we see real progress at COP26.